There's lots of messages in the chat. I don't know why I don't. Oh, here we go. Okay. There's lots of messages in the chat. We're live.
All right.
Go.
Okay. Well, should I then, first of all, we should introduce ourselves. I'm Steve Kaufmann, and
I'm Mark Kaufmann. We're the co-founders of LingQ, and very happy to be talking with all of you today.
we are co-founders because I had a great interest in language learning, and Mark had a lot of experience living in different countries and speaking different languages and some understanding of how the internet works. And we got together and we created LingQ. What is LingQ? I think a lot of people come to LingQ looking for chapter one. Mr. and Mrs. Jones arrive at the Milano airport, and so different scenarios and things like that. Language learning has changed. In behind me, you see CDs of audio and books and stuff. Not so important. Today, we're in the modern age. LingQ is a modern language learning platform. There are three essential things you need to know to understand LingQ. One, a major challenge in language learning is finding compelling input of interest, input at your level. LingQ makes that easier, and we're going to show you how you find compelling input at your level and where you can also go to find it outside of LingQ. The second thing is you need to get the words and the structures of the language into your brain. And I will show you, and Mark will show you, different activities at LingQ that help you get the words and structures into your brain. Whatever else you may do in terms of looking up grammar rules, it's essential that you get these words and structures into your brain. We'll show you how that works. And the third thing is you need to stay motivated. You have to stay the course. And there are a number of features at LingQ that help to keep you motivated. So with that, let me turn it over to Mark, because we're going to talk about learning at LingQ as a beginner, which Mark will start into, and he's going to tell you what language he wants to learn. Then I will share with you my experience as a, call it, early intermediate learner with Turkish. And then Mark will come back as an advanced intermediate, like upper intermediate learner of Italian. See you later.
Thanks, thanks, Steve. What I plan to do here is, as a beginner, let's see, share my screen here and switch over. So I'm going to be going to South Africa actually in January. I've never been there, so I thought this would be a good opportunity for me to at least learn a little Afrikaans before I go there, and therefore here today I'm going to be showing you what I would do or what I will do as I start to learn Afrikaans here on LingQ. And actually, you do hear from people, oh, LingQ isn't great for beginners, it's more for intermediates, and we definitely believe that's not the case. As a beginner, I definitely will be using LingQ and know that it will get me to whatever level it can get me to by the time I get to South Africa. So as a beginner, what I would do, I've just opened LingQ. I'm looking at the mini stories. We think that's the best place to start. I would click on 1A. And I guess just to briefly touch on, there are a bunch of shelves here, a lot less content in Afrikaans because it's a beta language, and therefore we only have what volunteers have added, but we definitely have the mini stories. And as a brand new user with zero knowledge of Afrikaans, I'm going to start here. Open lesson 1A. I know the story Mike is a cook because I've done it in other languages. And I'm just going to walk through and show you how I use it and try to sort of talk as I go, because I think that's the best way to get a sense of how to use LingQ. So Mike is a name. I don't need to know the translation. Actually, I'm just going to ignore this word. So this garbage can here ignores the word. I don't need to learn it. So then I move on to Stan, and I don't know why I can't hear it. Maybe Zoom interferes with the text to speech, but ordinarily, if I click on a word at LingQ, the text to speech plays automatically as I click. I think you won't be able to hear that. But this first word, Mike Stan, however that's pronounced, you can see on the right, popular meanings of the word. The first word, popular meaning, is actually generated by AI and is a context-based meaning of the word. All of these other meanings are meanings that other users have previously created for this word. In this case, I'll choose gets up. Sure, that's fine. The reality is I'm not about to learn this word today. It's my first exposure to the word. A lot of people feel pressured when they start that I have to learn all these words before moving on. That is definitely not the case. This is my first exposure. I click on the word, I choose a meaning, I move on to the next word. Elke, every, okay. There seems to be a bit of a delay here, but I'm not sure why, but I think Zoom is interfering a bit. That's strange. Anyway, effectively what I'll do is I'll go through every single word on this page, look them up. I know 0 words in this language. And a lot of the time when people are starting, you actually know more than 0. But for the most part, you either don't know the word, in which case you choose a meaning, or you know the word, in which case you mark it as known. And we want you to go through the text in this manner, effectively creating a link for every single word on the page. It can be a little bit slow going at the beginning, but that's fine. I'm just getting introduced to the language. I actually need to learn every word. I'm not going to learn them today. I just need to create these links by adding a meaning, and these words will reappear. If they matter, they'll reappear later on in this lesson, in the next lesson, in the lesson after that. And over time, the words that matter, the words that reappear often, I will learn them. And it's just a process. You kind of have to believe in the process. A lot of the time, people will leave words blue, not want to create links for them because they want to learn these first 5 words first. That's not the approach. You want to make them all links. Understand you're not going to learn them today. Keep going through the lessons and having those words reappear over time. Now, I'm just going to go through quickly here to for the sake of the demonstration. One thing I should point out, if I click on this, if I hover on the menu here and I go to the quick start guide, very important, if I'm on the web, which is obviously what I'm using right now, the keyboard shortcuts, in terms of efficiency, it's a very good idea if you start learning how to use the keyboard shortcuts. And then this other explanation here of the basic functionality plus the different levels of the words is very useful for you. So again, that's here under the quick start guide. So I'm going to start using my keyboard shortcuts to go through this, and I'm actually going to go through very quickly here to try and what I'm using the right arrow key, which effectively chooses the first meaning for every word as I go through. Typically, I'll try to understand what's being said, but you know what? Rather than having everybody watch me use LingQ, assuming I've gone through it all, created a bunch of links, the words that are still blue, if I don't create links for these words and I complete the lesson by clicking this button here on the right, our system's going to assume that I know these words, because either I don't know them, in which case I should click on them and add a meaning, create a link, or I know them, in which case I can manually mark each one as known, or I can simply complete the lesson to make them all known. So that's what I did here. And then you see I've added these words, I've created these links. And then I can go on to the next lesson. Now, actually, I should, before moving on, worth pointing out a few different things within this lesson. First of all, most of the lessons in our library, if they're not external, have audio, and you can't hear it because Zoom interferes with the audio. But assuming you could hear it, you'd press play down here. You could hear the full lesson audio. There's an ability to play the audio as the text highlights sentence by sentence. This karaoke mode is actually a great way to go through the lesson. Try and read along as you listen, just to try to match up what you're hearing with what's written in the text, and in a new language. And it's really a shame that we can't hear the audio, but I'm sure that I would have a hard time differentiating the different words. From what I would guess from Afrikaans, after if it's related to Dutch, that it would be hard to initially separate the words. That's why it's so important to be able to read and listen at the same time. The other thing worth pointing out, sentence mode is a great way to go through lessons, especially as a beginner. You get the lesson shown to you sentence by sentence. If there were still blue words in this sentence, they would be listed here. Any links that I've created are listed here. I can click and see an exact translation for this sentence. I can change status for any of these words very easily. I can do the same here by clicking on those words and changing status. Status is one of those things. It is mostly a manual function. And let's say this word, which work means work, probably pronounced differently, but if I were to use this, or I'm going to have a pretty good idea what this word means because it's quite similar to English. So maybe even at this point, I'm going to say, okay, that's a status 2. You'll see that if I hover, there are different status names that show, but it's up to you to decide when you feel like it's a 2 or a 3, or when you want to make it known. If you make it known, it increases your known words number, which is a key metric for us. That's the best indicator we feel for how you're progressing in the language. But again, if you make it known, like, don't be worried to make it known. Like, if you think you know it, make it known. If you come across it later and you don't know it, change it back. Over time, you'll actually find that most of the words you think you know, you actually do know. You actually will remember them when you see them again. But don't get too worked up about making sure you know a word like 300% before moving it to known. That's not the intention. The intention is to sort of give you a bit of a guide, so you can measure your progress and move words along. And I think the one big thing, I'm a beginner, so in fact, I know 0 words in this language. Over time, I know that if I keep going, if I keep doing new lessons, my pages will get lighter. Fewer blue words, fewer yellow words over time. At this point, maybe I will go to the next lesson now. And so you'll see a bunch of the links that I created in the previous lesson now show up in this next lesson, along with a variety of new words, and then some of these words that I said I knew in the previous lesson. And that's a big part of what we do, is we track all the words that you see on LingQ. And every time you open up a new lesson, any words you haven't seen before will show up in blue. The idea is that you want to go through the lesson, indicate to the system whether you know or want to learn those blue words. And I guess review the existing links that have carried over, and really over time, as you see words in different contexts, as I've already said, they'll just start to stick. And a big part of it is believing in the process and not sort of getting hung up on wanting to learn things now. That's not how language learning works. It's just a process. Read, listen, try and listen as half an hour every day. Every time you complete a lesson, it is added to your playlist. And I think Steve will touch on that later, but it's worth knowing that all completed lessons, like by completed, I mean the blue words have been removed. Completed doesn't mean you've learned them. It just means that you've gone through them, gotten rid of the blue words, and are now in the process of trying to learn that content that's there. Before I hand you over to Steve, I'll just point out a couple other things. The first is this review sentence option when you're in sentence mode. It's great as a beginner to be able to do this. So any of the words on the page, it shows you matching pair, a matching pair activity. Which is always fun. It gives you this ability to rewrite this sentence or to get the English translation of the sentence and write it in this case Afrikaans. There's no way I could do that now. But it's a very good way to in sentence mode review the sentence. The last thing I wanted to point out is that you can save phrases just by selecting two words together. This phrase means the same story, creates a link just like any other link. The other thing worth pointing out is that if I click on a blue or yellow word, I'll very often see this related phrases section in the widget. And here you'll see a list of phrases that other users have saved containing this word in this location. So this looks like probably that's a phrase worth saving. Maybe not, actually, as I look at it. So then I wouldn't save that phrase. And I think at that point, I'll turn it back over to you, Steve.
So, okay, now it's my turn here. So I'm going to do this off my iPad because that's where I spend most of my time. So I'm going to share my iPad screen, and you're going to have to bear with me. It takes a little bit of time for that to come up. And now I'm going to mirror from my iPad, Zoom, and we'll wait for that to come up. While waiting for it, here we are. Okay. I'm assuming that that's visible now. So
Yep.
I'm an intermediate, a lower intermediate learner of Turkish. And so I'm going to talk about my experiences there. Again, I'm going to talk about how I get content, which it becomes increasingly important because when you start, I think the mini stories are a great way to start. I started with mini stories in Turkish, in Persian, in every language that I've done. A lot of repetition, it gets you started. But then at some point, you've got to reach out for more interesting content. Let me just share one thing with you, though, and that has to do with a subject that I will get back to, which is motivation. And known words is our key indicator of how we're doing in the language. In the last 7 days, I have added 1,800 known words to my known words total. And if I look at my history with Turkish, you will see that I started back in 2018. I had a very intensive 3 months, mostly with the mini stories, a little bit of other content. And then I didn't look at Turkish because I focused on Arabic and Persian with their difficult script. And then in the last 5 or 6 months, I picked up again, and I have saved, essentially, I've added 20,000 known words to my total. And I'll show how I do that and why that is very motivating for me. But the first thing is to find content. So if you go to our library, and I happen to be interested in history, So I go tarihi, which is history, and search, and I get everything, or not everything, but lots of stuff in our library that's related to Turkish. As a freebie, I get self-help, science, culture, politics, lots of different things. There is no shortage of content in our library. So I want to make that point before showing you how I can bring in content from other places. But compelling content is key. And again, I began by saying I have all these audio CDs behind me. I've got lots of books. I have books on learning different languages. Nowadays, so much is available for us either in the LingQ library or online that we can import and use. So compelling input is key. There are, now let's just get out of there. We call these things shelves. So there's the continuing study shelf, which is what we are, these are lessons or courses that we have been working on, either lessons or courses. Some of them are imported lessons. Then we got stuff on language, grammar, what's new, history, mini stories, podcast. I mean, there's an enormous amount of stuff on these different shelves. But the main shelf that I go to all the time is my current, what I am studying now and what I've been studying recently. So, and so I've shown you the shelves, I've shown you the search. There are filters, I'm not going to get into it. You have to be a bit of an explorer, looking for things of interest to you. Easier to find things in our library than to find things on the internet, which is more difficult. But if we do go on the internet, of course, we can go to YouTube and import. We can bring in, I, for Arabic, use TV programs. I can bring in, but I'm not going to demonstrate it now. I can take a PDF of an ebook and drag and drop it into LingQ, and I have the ebook broken down into, you know, fairly lengthy lessons, but I can study it on LingQ, and I'll show you how I do that later on. I can get MP3 files of podcasts where they're available, bring them into LingQ, just drag and drop, and that will create a lesson. It'll transcribe it, and I'll have a lesson that I can now use to learn. That's about all I have time for now. You have to, we can only touch on certain things today. The other thing I found very useful is ChatGPT. So one of the courses I was using in Turkish was a sort of a podcast that gave summaries of different self-help books. Self-help books are very easy for language learners. There's lots of basic vocabulary that repeats. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, give me in 1,000 words or less. No, first I asked GPT, what are the most popular self-help books in 2023? Give me a list. So I said, okay, here's a book, Atomic Habits. Give me 1,000 words or less summary in Turkish of Atomic Habits. In no time I have it. I import it. Of course, I don't have the natural voice audio, but I study it and I can harvest a lot of words. But I did the same for give me a history of the Ottoman Empire, give me a biography of Ataturk, whatever. ChatGPT just churns it out. Even if it's not 100% accurate, it's a lot of words and it's things of interest to me. Okay, so that's on the subject of getting that compelling input, which is so important to success. Now, how do you get the words and structures of the language into your brain? Mark has touched on the sort of basic functionality, how we encounter new words, we look up the meaning, we save them. Very often I find myself taking the AI-generated meaning because it's relevant to the context. I create links, and pretty soon I have this list of new words, links, and so forth, so that when I go here, you can see, for example, in these different courses, the blue words are new words. So in the first one, which is a Turkish history course, and if I were to go to the specific lesson in there, so you'll see that, you know, I've completed one where there's still 7% new words, but if I go to this one, there's like 30% new words, which is an awful lot. But I am able to, and it'll come up shortly here, but I am able to go through this even with 30% unknown words because I can do it one page at a time. I can do it once if I want to. I can do it a sentence at a time, and it makes it a lot easier. So I can go through it at a sentence at a time, and it just reduces the pressure, okay? And very often while doing it, I will find words that I know and claim as known. However, what I'm tending to do now with this material that comes in, I should show you, by the way, this comes from, I won't go there, but Storytel, which is a audiobook a website, has a lot of Turkish audiobooks. This is a history of Turkey, a very good, a very well-known, very famous history of Turkey. So I was able to get the e-text, I bring it in. The audio, I have to listen on their app. I can't listen at LingQ. But what I do is I take it one page at a time on LingQ. So I go here, and at the bottom right-hand corner, there are all kinds of vocabulary review functions, which are very useful for getting the language in you. So I touch on that. And what I tend to use with my history course, because each lesson is so long, I can't do the lesson. It's too many words. One key, to my mind, key issue in reviewing vocabulary, you want it to be close to the content you're working with. You don't want to be going through thousands of words. So if I go to review page, I don't. So therefore, I can go through, you know, whatever new words are on this page and review them. However, blue words are not in that list. So I then, typically, if I'm doing it myself, I go and convert the blue words on the page into yellow. Then I review them in the format that I just showed you. Now, we're going to rush through this, but there is another bit of content that I've been using, which is a wonderful novel. So my Turkish learning now, because when I showed you my graph, in the first 3 months, it was all mini stories. But now I want things of interest. So I have my history, but I also have a novel, which is Havanın Üç Kızı. Okay, so I go on that. Now here, I have taken the trouble of copy pasting so that the lessons are not too long. And what I find, and the same is true for the self-help books that I use, if there is not too much vocabulary, say if I open that one, what I do here is I go to the same corner and I do the vocabulary review for the lesson. And it's divided into blue words and yellow words. And I find that I can go through like Bahçeli, I know, I can pick a lot of words in that blue list that I already know. The motivation here is I'm able to clean up the blue words, and then I review the yellow words before I go into reading. And it's a very quick way to add to your known words total. So I've been motivated to add lots of new words, known words. And so if I start the day by going through this list, very quickly, I can get up to 100 or 150 new words. It's possible in Turkish, may not be possible in other languages. Turkish, everything happens at the end of a word. So there are a lot of words, different forms of the same verb that have the same meaning. They're in alphabetical order. It's actually quite easy to add to your known words total. One of the things I said at the beginning was you need compelling input. You need a method of getting the kind of words and structure into your brain, but you also have to stay motivated. And I find it motivating every day to say, I have got to get to 250 new known words. And I've done that now for 3 months with the result that I have a lot easier time with this content than I had at the beginning. And I've added 20,000 known words to my known words total. But these are all things that people have to experiment on their own and find what way they find most useful to keep themselves motivated to push those words and phrases into your brain. You can use other resources like grammar resources, and we have grammar resources at LingQ, and it's good to review them from time to time. And gosh knows I've bought books on Turkish grammar, but ultimately, in order for you to get used to the language, you have to do, obviously, a lot of listening and reading, creating links, find whichever way of reviewing vocabulary suits your style the best. I find that reviewing long lists of vocabulary doesn't work, but if I have it close enough to the text that I'm actually reading and enjoying, then it works. And finally, normally, if I'm picking lessons from our library, then I will typically for a course, I will tend to use the function, listen to course audio, play course audio. So all the playlists that I use are that course. However, as Mark pointed out, every time you finish a lesson, it goes to your main playlist. So you can also listen to the playlist scrambled, as it were. But listening is a big part of it. But with what I'm now, the Turkish resources that I got from Storytel, I can only listen on the app. So I don't have that option. but there is so much material in our library in Turkish or in, I'm sure, the language that you're learning. You can spend a lot of time with content where the audio is available in our library. So I think that's enough. Now I got to turn it back to Mark to talk about Italian, and hopefully we'll have time for questions and answers. So now I will stop share. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Steve. I think, you know, it's always hard when we start trying to explain all the features and capabilities of LingQ to try and keep things short, but we're already at half an hour. So what I'm going to do is try to go through quickly here some ways to import. In Italian, you can see I have a lot of known words. So at this point, I mostly use imported content. One of the most obvious sources here in the library for imported content is Netflix. So you'll see there's a Netflix shelf. If I want to import something from Netflix, I click on it. I have the extension installed already. If you don't have the extension installed, that's something you should definitely do once you start importing. It's a browser extension. It's this control here, and I'm in Safari, but depending on whatever browser you happen to be using. Here, when I click through to this show on Netflix, it takes me to the first episode. I click to import this. I would probably create a course for this show, and then Italian, yeah. It's going to import. What it does is that it imports the subtitles, which I can then view on LingQ as a lesson. So typically when I'm watching a show on Netflix, I'll either watch that episode first and then read it here on LingQ, or I'll read the episode first and watch it on Netflix. I tend to sort of do both things depending on how into the show on Netflix I am. But at any rate, that's a great thing to do if you can find a good TV show. Take advantage of that Netflix capability. Likewise, YouTube has obviously a massive amount of content on all manner of things. If you click the provider button in our library, you get a list of the YouTube content that's actually in our library. All of the stuff that's in our library does have transcripts. If you go to YouTube and search, you may run into videos that don't have transcripts, which can't be imported using the extension. But most do have at least automated transcripts, and we're continually improving this functionality. You do have the ability, if you really want to import a YouTube video that doesn't have captions, you can find a third-party tool on the internet to rip the audio, and then you can import that audio into LingQ, and we'll actually generate a transcript for you using AI. So this control, or this option here, allows you to drag in an audio file, which will then be used to generate a transcript. So that is yet again another great way to import content. If you have, for example, a podcast MP3 file or something, you can import that and we'll generate a transcript for you. Actually, staying with this pop-up, you also have the ability here to drag and drop ebook files. Obviously, you know, out of copyright books are fine to import. Copyrighted books are more difficult. You'll often have to figure out how to remove the DRM, but typically a Google search will show you how to do that, and then those books can be imported. Like this here is a book that I imported in Italian. Bought the ebook and then removed the DRM and uploaded it here on LingQ, and it's I find, you know, and to get to a level of vocabulary like I'm at here in Italian, the by far the best way is by reading books. There's just so many words, and I've read, I don't know, call it 10 books in Italian so far. And I find that for me, almost the best content because one book keeps me going for quite a while. I think with that, I actually the last thing to point out is this newsfeed shelf, which pulls in articles from different Italian, in this case, news sources. So if I click on these are imported, but they're imported automatically, sort of in the background. So while that's happening, I think actually, so there it is. At any rate, I'm going to stop there because we do have a lot of questions rolling in, and as we answer them, I think we can continue to point out different things. So with that, maybe we'll start looking at the questions. First question from Felipe: what is the best way to make use of review exercises? Maybe I'll turn that over to Steve.
That's one of the areas that's very individual. Depends what you like to do. I can only tell you what I find the most effective, and I've explored the different ways of doing it. I've gone to the vocabulary section and spent some time there. Now I basically only review either before or after the lesson that I am in. If I'm doing, and I pointed, there's 4 sort of review exercises in the bottom right-hand corner. I don't think I'll put my screen up there, but there's 4 of them. I use the one at the top, which is reviewing the page, which makes me go through flashcards. I don't do the closed test or multiple choice or any of those. I want to go through the flashcards fast. To me, flashcard review, vocabulary review should be fast, should be a limited number, and should be close to the text that you're reading and enjoying and listening to. So I go through that flashcard review. I make sure I only have the flashcard there. I don't have the other activities. I go through it quickly. I don't worry about what I remember. I don't scratch my brain. It's another form. It's a concentrated form of exposure. The other form of review, which I showed you, was when I'm in a shorter lesson, 5 minutes, 6, 7, 8, 500 words, then I'll typically go through and claim some known words ahead of time and go through the yellow words. Again, I will claim some of them as known. So it's a form of review and it's a form of harvesting known words. That's what I like to do. However, we offer other options. You can export to Anki. You can do whatever you want. I think this is very much a matter of personal preference.
What I would also say too is we hear from users that they get sort of worried that they're creating too many links and I'm never going to be able to review all these links, and so I don't want to keep making more, and that is 100% something you should not worry about. You should create as many links as you possibly can. You do not need to review them all. In fact, you do review them every time you see them in the text, in a new text, future texts. So the number one thing is don't feel pressure. Review when you feel like reviewing a page before you read it. That's a good way of doing it, but don't stop yourself from reading further, starting new lessons, creating new links just because you're worried about reviewing. The other thing is, for me, I know that in Afrikaans, where I know zero, I'm gonna do more review. The way I like to use review is if I'm new in the language, I need it to just try to get a bit of a toehold. I have to admit, once I'm sort of out of that beginner stage, I do very little review. But as Steve says, I think it's personal preference. A lot of it is as well, and that kind of leads into this next question, which asks from John Lewis: is there a way to export my words? In the vocabulary section, you can export any list of words that you see there. You have to select the words, or the select all, and then the option to export exists. You can export as a file. You can export as a file, which can be imported into Anki. From within the lesson, you can actually view your vocabulary list, like click through to see the lessons vocabulary list on the vocabulary page, so you can export it. So just play around a little bit with the settings in the vocabulary section. I don't think we'll show it here, but all of those things are possible, and you can always check out the knowledge base on the web app to learn how to do these things if you still have questions. It's part of the forum, but you can do a search for the LingQ knowledge base there and answer most of your questions. Marion asks if we can explain karaoke mode.
Well, if you think of karaoke, you think of the words to the song appear on the screen and you hear the music and you sing. So what happens is the lesson, the sort of cursor or line by line, it highlights the line that you're actually listening to. So it follows the audio down. And it's a nice way to go through the lesson. Sometimes, it keeps us focused. I must admit, I don't do it very much, but it is, again, we offer a lot of features, and in language learning, some people prefer A, B, C, so it's there to use.
Okay, and then Laura Jackson asks how to turn reading comprehension into listening comprehension. How often should I repeat the same lessons?
Okay, I'm listening to stuff that I understand 20% of at best. I go through but as I'm listening to these audiobooks that are too advanced for me in Turkish, I'm hearing phrases here, words there, things that I can't put it all together as meaning while I'm listening. If I'm reading that same lesson, and particularly in sentence mode, and if I can look up the words, either new words or words that I saved before, and then I can make sense of that sentence. So actually, I can go through a difficult book like this. Because a book is a very difficult book, but I'm enjoying it. And I'm going through it sentence by sentence, looking up words. And I know that the words that I look up or the words that I saved before that I see again, they're just thrown into my memory reserve. I can't recall them, but they're thrown in there. But I'm enjoying the book at the same time. So I never worry too much about how well I understand something when listening that I kind of thought that I understood while reading. Eventually, you'll understand more and more. It's like so much in language learning, you have to believe in the process and just keep going. And eventually, you will understand more. But even when you're listening, where you're only picking up bits and pieces of words here and there, you're actually helping your brain learn them because you're hearing those words in different contexts, you're identifying them, and it's adding to that ability to one day be able to recall those, retrieve those when you need them.
And going back to that previous question on karaoke mode, that's one way to try and at least match up your listening with your reading. And there actually is a setting to even enable the highlighting to appear in the regular page mode. You'll see that if you go into the reader settings, you can enable it so that playing the audio in the normal text page will also highlight words. And just in general, I think in general, if we look at the statistics of people and what they do on LingQ, the users don't listen enough. It's very important to listen. You should be listening half an hour, 40 minutes a day. Try to do so using dead time in the day, like when you're going for a walk or washing the dishes or commuting. If you can pick up 30, 40 minutes a day of listening to the content that you're reading, and reviewing and learning on LingQ, that'll make a big difference. Your brain just needs more exposure, and ideally natural exposure. So exposure to the way real people speak at real speeds. There's no shortcut for that listening. And that was going back to earlier when I guess both Steve and I mentioned the playlist. As I said before, any lessons that are completed are automatically added to your playlist. And then when you're out, it's very easy to open the mobile app, start the playlist, and I just actually scramble my playlist. So every time I get in my car, I just press play on my playlist and it plays whatever whatever's mixed in there, the last 100 lessons that I completed, it's a great way to review. It's a great way to quickly get listening and not have to fiddle around trying to find the right thing. So definitely something that all users should become familiar with and make sure to do that. Your 30 minutes a day of listening. The last question also from Laura, how often should I repeat the same lessons? Again, that's up to you, but don't stay on the same lesson until you know it 100%. That is not the idea. I don't know, 50, 70, 80%, good enough, move on, start a new lesson. You can always come back. And in fact, you'll find if you start 2, 3, 4, 5, if like, for example, if I'm in Afrikaans and I'm in the mini stories, I'll just go through once I finish lesson 1, I'm on to lesson 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll come back to 1, 2, 3. I'll review them again. And after the 5th lesson, when I come back to the first lesson, actually, I know a lot more than I did when I first started out here. Like it's just a natural process. If you're starting to, lose focus and get bored, move on. There's no reason you have to stay with something.
What I would add to that is, in my experience, when you start out in a language, there is a lot of repetition. If I check my statistics of how often I have listened to a particular mini story, it's 30, 40, 50 times. But I didn't listen to it 30 times, at the same time. I do exactly what Mark said. I do lesson 1. I'm bored now. I'm not interested. Maybe I listen to it twice because I'm at the very beginning. Then I go to 2, 3, 4, 5, go back to 1. But I find even now, I go back to the mini stories to review some of the basic structures in the language, because the mini stories, it's like going to the gym. It's verbs, it's tenses, it's persons. And so you end up listening to that kind of content many, many times, 30, 40, 50 times. If you're starting a new language and you've done a previous language at LingQ, the fact that you already know the mini stories is actually a big help. But at the point where I am now in Turkish, where I consider myself sort of lower intermediate, I don't want to listen many, many times. I'm now listening for meaning. I'm interested in Turkish history. I'm interested in the novel. So I'm more interested in finding out what happened to the woman who was attacked by a bum in the streets or whatever that's happening in my story. I want to follow the story. So I don't repeat. But in the early stages, particularly with the mini stories, which are designed for lots of repetition, you need to repeat a lot, but not at one sitting. Go to the 5th lesson, come back to the 1st, go to the 8th, come back to the 2nd, that kind of thing.
Question from Brendan Shine. What's the best way to get better at oral comprehension? I think we maybe touched on that already. Should I watch with or without subtitles, podcast with or without reviewing the transcript?
I mean, in my view, it's all good. It's all good. Oral comprehension, particularly in some languages, for some reason, French is very difficult because it kind of blends together. I think sentence mode helps a lot of listening and reading. Personally, videos to me are entertainment. And because there's so much stuff that's not verbal, not words, a car speeding up a hill, a door slamming, moments of silence. Whereas an audiobook or a book, if you're reading a book, that's just words. So I think an audiobook, a slightly difficult audiobook where you're looking up the words and you're enjoying the audiobook, and even if you're not getting everything, that's constantly improving your oral comprehension. Bear in mind that when you get into an actual situation of having to use the language with a native speaker in some situation, if that situation is new to you, it's going to be difficult. However much you're prepared and you've listened to podcasts and you've heard audiobooks, but all of a sudden you're there, you're in the store, you're at the train station, you got to do it now, real time. This is real. It's difficult. But the second or third time you're in that situation, it gets better. So I guess my advice is be patient.
And for sure. And a lot of listening, watching with or without subtitles. I mean, I watch with subtitles. Watching without subtitles, if it's a Netflix show, is very hard. I find like it's very colloquial when people talk in movies or TV shows, and I find captions very helpful, or subtitles in English. Like watch it once with subtitles, watch it again with captions. All of it helps. Um, I think I'll do typically, as Steve says, I'm watching for meaning or reading for meaning. But if I'm watching a show with subtitles, I kind of switch. Sometimes I'll use native language captions. Sometimes I'll use English. See if I can match up what I'm hearing with what the meaning is telling me. I think there's no right answer. It's all good exposure. Find what works for you. If I'll use captions on Netflix, but then I'll have our app open and read the text on Link where I'm getting the meaning. So it's there's different ways of doing it, and all of it is good. Podcast, I think just naturally end up sometimes listening without having looked at the transcript, sometimes having done the transcript ahead of time. Again, I think it's personal preference, and it's all good.
Variety is good.
And that's a big part of our message in the end is don't get hung up on having the perfect, doing everything perfect. There is no perfect. There's no hard process to follow. You're just trying to flood your brain with content and use different tools to help you understand better. If you take something that's very challenging, but you are very interested in the content, you'll have more patience and you'll spend the time to go through it more slowly. There is actually an option to simplify using AI, which is maybe something people want to check out. If you have a complicated lesson you're struggling with, in the menu for that lesson, there's a simplify using AI option, which creates a new dumbed down version, which you can do first and then come back to the original, and you'll have a better chance at making your way through it. But again, don't get hung up. Just flood your brain, trust the process, and after 1 month, after 3 months, if you go back to where you started, you'll be amazed at how much better you are. You'll be amazed at how many of the words you start, the yellow words that you previously didn't know, you now know, and you move to known. Like it's like the Steve's analogy of a snowball rolling down a hill. That is the process. It initially feels like not much is happening, but it really picks up steam as you go, and you get into the tens of thousands of words, and that's where you're really now getting a good grip on your language. I hear a good question to end with as we wind things up from Bob Tatar. How long should it take to learn a language if I use LingQ consistently?
Okay, I'll give you a quick answer. Depends what you mean by learn a language, but to be able to more or less function, to get a toehold in the language. So I had a trip planned to Romania. So Romania, 2, 3 months. I go there, I'm talking to people, enjoying myself. Arabic, it's been 5 years off and on. Okay. Romanian is written in Latin alphabet. There's 70% words like Italian. It's easy. And if you're an English speaker learning Spanish or French, half the vocabulary you know. So obviously that's much faster. If you're going to learn Chinese or even Russian, which has a different script is always much more difficult. Common vocabulary, is there much common vocabulary? All these things influence it. But if you look at the most commonly learned languages, like if you're an English speaker and you're learning French, Spanish, Italian, German, I think that if you spend 3 months on the mini stories and another 3 months on sort of lower intermediate stuff that you can find in our library, you are now at a level where you can tackle Netflix, you can tackle YouTube, you can tackle all kinds of stuff. And from that point on, you're just enjoying the language. And there is no final finish line. You're constantly working at it, but you can ramp up to that level within 3 to 6 months with, say, Spanish, French, Italian. Now, if you're going after Korean, Japanese, Chinese, obviously, or Arabic, Farsi, it's going to be a lot more difficult.
Yeah, definitely agree with that statement. And the amount of time that you have to spend is obviously a big factor as well.
Mm. Per day.
Per day. Yeah. I mean, you said you've been at Arabic for 5 years, but you've taken long stretches off, and so it's fundamentally it's about getting to that stage where you're able to enjoy real content, engage with the content, and sort of enjoy the journey. The first part is more
I
work, but it's also the novelty is there. So it's fun in a different way. But then at a certain point, now it's about the content that you're ingesting and just growing your language. And then if you're able to go to the country where the language is spoken and have the ability to practice, that's obviously going to help your spoken. Um,
That's a very good point. I mean, I did Chinese in 1 year, but I studied very intensely, very intensely. Plus, I had an opportunity to go into China twice a year to the Canton Trade Fair and help interpret for Canadian business people and stuff. I mean, that was a total intense environment. My Arabic is not like that. If I had had the same degree of intensity, if I was sitting in Cairo and working and getting 3 hours a day with a teacher plus link and stuff like that, like it could be done in a year. But if you're at a slower pace, but I enjoy it. So I'm not in a hurry.
okay, great. Well, we're basically at the end of our hour. So thanks everyone for joining. Hopefully we've answered a bunch of your questions and pointed out some of the great features available here at Link. Obviously, if you ever have questions either about the method or about how to do things on the apps, post them on the forum, write into support, check out our knowledge base, which exists in our forum. Very happy. We're always very happy. Our support responds quickly. We're happy to address any questions and look forward to meeting you all, on the community. Okay.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot.